You're listening to Just a Dude podcast with your host, Nathan. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Let's roll. Welcome to Just a Dude podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, bringing you real conversations with fascinating people. Today, we're diving into an incredible story of adventure, grit, and life at 30,000 feet with our special guest. Joining me is Donald Osborn, author of Where We Land, A Pilot's Reflection at Altitude. From small-town Nebraska to flying the skies as a commercial pilot, Don's lived a life full of wild tales. Think celebrities, presidents, and even human organs. He's here to share it all, so buckle up. Don, welcome to the show. Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Hey, Nate, it's great to be here. I sure appreciate the invite, too. I listened to some of your podcasts, and they sound like a lot of fun. So
I appreciate that.
My name is Don Osborn. I'm a retired airline pilot, and I wrote a book about it. I hate to admit it, this number doesn't even roll off my I can't believe when I say it, but I'll be 69 the end of December, so.
Wow. Yeah.
That's what I think.
The good thing, Don, is you don't look it. So,
well, they say the camera adds 10 pounds. Maybe it subtracts 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years, right? Well, excellent. And the book we're talking about, Don, I'm going to show it up to here to the camera, is Where We Land, because this was an absolutely, it's a memoir, right, about you and your experiences. But I loved it because it didn't read like a memoir. It was fun. You had good, relatable stories in there, and we're going to get into all this. But, I want to kind of take us back a little bit, if I can, Don, to just your humble beginnings growing up in Nebraska. And, let's just start there and tell us how you got into flying.
Well, again, in western Nebraska, I grew up in kind of a poverty situation. I was raised by a single mother with 3 siblings. And we never went hungry. We weren't that poor, but my mom worked 3 jobs all the time to do that. And back growing up in western Nebraska, the thought is there's got to be somewhere better than this. I got to get out of here. How am I going to get out of here? To be fair to western Nebraska, I go back there now and I think, what a wonderful place. But at the time, I didn't realize it. But
Don, I was just going to say, Don, it's so funny you say that because I was the same way growing up in Ohio, a Midwestern town, small town here. And I was like, all I want to do is get out. All I want to do is get out. And now I live exactly where I grew up. So,
yeah. Well, I'm heading back there tomorrow where I grew up. So
that's awesome. It is so funny how when we're younger, we want to escape. And then when we get older and realize, how it wasn't too bad, we go back.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I wonder what's over the hill. I got to find out.
Yeah. And so was that kind of what drove you to think, aeronautics? Because I know aeronautics and piloting really started at a young age for you, right?
Right around 14. One of my first memories, I remember watching an airplane fly over. And there was an old guy that had an airplane at the edge of town. Once in a while, you'd see that airplane fly over. And in a small town like Shadron, Nebraska, you don't see an airplane very often.
Right.
So I would see that airplane, it'd fascinate me, and I would ride my bike trying to figure out where he's landing. And I finally figured out where he's landing. I watched him push it into this old hangar he had, and that was all it took. I thought, I need to get in there and see this thing. I want to see what it looks like.
Yeah, and
the old saying about the way I broke into aviation, that's kind of true.
Literally. Yeah, I don't want to give that away for our readers, but literally Don broke into aviation.
Exactly.
But yeah, and then not only that, but you then become, I don't want to give anything away, but essentially that led to you learning to fly, right?
Correct, right. And again, back then, it was a question I hear a lot is, what's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you in an airplane or in aviation? And my standard answer is, way back when, this old guy would charge me $12 an hour to fly. And the scariest thing was showing up for a lesson without $12 because he did not like that.
Yeah, and it's so funny you say $12, and today we're like, $12 is nothing. But back when we were kids, $12 is a lot of money, especially for a 14-year-old kid to come up with.
Yeah, back when you're making it at 50, 70 cents an hour. Yeah, it took a while. But if you look at my logbook way back then, about every 7 to 10 days I had a flight lesson, and that's because that's about what it took me to make the $12.
Yeah. And that I would say your learning path was probably not the same as what most people would see today, was it?
Oh, now everything's organized. It's kind of like kids and parents nowadays. everything is organized. You go to you at 2 o'clock, you're here at 3 o'clock, you're there, and that's what flying schools are like nowadays. Is A, B, C, D, and you complete the entire program. Back then, it was how am I gonna in college, I used to try to pay attention to what girls appeared to have daddy paying their way through college. I
Mm-hmm.
talk them into an airplane ride, and then of course tell them they'd have to rent the airplane.
Yep,
So I mean,
exactly.
it took a lot of bobbing and weaving to think of how am I going to get the money to fly this thing.
Yeah, smart ingenuity, as I like to call it. Right?
Exactly.
You took, but and you started in Nebraska, and you had this gentleman. I'm going to call him gentleman. I don't know if he really was. It sounds like he could have been, maybe a rough guy, right?
Yeah,
But
sort of.
he taught you how to fly, or at least got you, your foot in the door, and then you kind of moved up a little bit, and then went into instructing, didn't you? At some point.
Yeah, I got my instructor's license real close to my 18th birthday, and that helped a lot because all the way through college, I was able to flight instruct and fly some charter. And so when college ended, I was able to kind of start. I had enough time that a flight school out in Phoenix looked at me fairly serious as an instructor and ended up hiring me.
Yeah, and that's absolutely amazing to think about that you were an instructor at 18 years old, right? I have to assume you were probably one of not many at that
Well,
age.
that's funny. Shadron, Nebraska, I was like the flight instructor. I mean, I was the kid that could fly. So I leave Shadron, which is a town of 5,000 people, and end up in Phoenix. Well, all of a sudden, it's a rude awakening because I'm full. I'm in a room full of kids that are younger than myself, with more experience than me, with better, with more ratings. So it was like you swallow hard because wow,
Yeah.
all of a sudden I'm in a new world.
Yeah, a whole new market, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a much bigger market than when you came from. So it's
Right.
going to be I don't want to say inundated, but there's going to be more competition for sure.
Sure, exactly.
So that makes it a little bit tougher, but that actually probably, I have to assume, pushed you to want to do even better than your competition.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think competition is always good, regardless of a lot of you'll hear small business owners upset that somebody, but I think what's the McDonald's Burger King theory? Burger King always builds something next to McDonald's because they know somebody's in that area looking for hamburger.
Yep, exactly. It's so funny that you say that because that's a great way to think about it and how this competition grows but it makes us stronger as individuals too when we're in a good healthy competition setting. And that helped really kind of launch your career, didn't it, Don? I mean, from going to a flight instructor and then you worked your way up to what we'll call a commercial pilot,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Because I read your book, so I know that a commercial pilot's technically the license, right?
Exactly right.
But you can still, fly private or, whatever with that, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. It's a pleasure being interviewed by somebody who's actually read the book. I can tell you, I know you read the book. That's a
Yeah.
compliment. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
And I love to read. And especially when you sent me the book. So I got to say that there was, I didn't pay it and you didn't pay me to read it either.
Yeah.
But I loved it because there's so many things that I could relate to, even though I've never been a pilot.
Yeah.
From just regular everyday. And some of the stories you said were just so fun, and some of the people that you met and some of the experiences that you've had, including, your family, which I'm sure we'll get into. But it wasn't easy for you once you got into being a quote unquote commercial pilot, right? The big airline pilot. And one of the things that I learned from your book, Don, that I had no idea was how cutthroat it really is in the airline industry for pilots.
Back then it was. I mean, you got one chance. You got your one chance, and that was it. It was you fly for your license basically. If you make a mistake in the simulator, they may or may not give you another one. Today, it's much kinder and gentler. Today, there's
Of
such
course.
a shortage of pilots, and the airlines, they actually go out and recruit people to come into their airline. They'll recruit out of colleges.
Yeah.
Just about every major college in the United States now has some type of aviation program.
Yeah, and you really came up into, the airline industry when it was really starting to boom, right? And there was
Well,
a
yeah,
ton of, I mean, maybe not boom is not a good word, but there was a ton of airlines compared to today.
exactly. Another common question people like to ask is, what airline did you fly for? Well, my answer is pretty simple. You name one that went out of business, I was flying
That's the
for,
way you did.
and probably had just made captain right before they went out of business.
Yeah,
When,
and then
when you
isn't that
start
how it
over,
usually goes, right, Don? Just you
yeah,
put all this hard
start
work
over,
in, you get there
don't
and
start over.
yep.
Yeah, you don't start over in an airline at where you were. You start over at the very bottom of the seniority list as a co-pilot. So one day you're a captain running the show. The next day you're a co-pilot saying, yes, sir. If that's how you want to do it, you're the captain.
And I have to say that it says something to your character, Don, about the fact that you were willing, and I know you have a huge passion for aviation or flying in particular. And the fact that you were willing to do that over and over again, go to the top, back to the bottom, go to the top, back to the bottom, really speaks to your character about you really knowing what you wanted to do with your life. And another thing I wanted to call out that I absolutely loved in the book was how you put a very big exclamation point on safety and how you took that like as your number one priority. And I absolutely love that.
In this business, it has to be. I mean, again, saying, they talk about, well, you have 190 people in the back. What kind of pressure is that? Well, the pressure is for me. I worry about my butt. If my butt safely gets there, so will everybody else.
Exactly. Everybody's going to follow along, right?
Knowing what you want to do, I think that's real important to give advice to kids, even through our children's book now. It's think of what you want to do at an early age. I asked my kids at a very young age, what do you want to do when you get big? What do you want to be? And I knew what I wanted to do at a very young age. I know that probably kept me out of jail or maybe prison. Who knows? At a young age, you knew, well, I better not do this because
and
both of my kids knew what they want to do at a very young age. And I think that helped them stay out of jail also.
And think about how fortunate you were that you had that, the guy with the plane in the shed that, was actually willing to teach you and take you kind of under his wing. I say teach you loosely because, I did read the book and I found out that he wasn't necessarily always there with you teaching.
I learned something about that guy. I was out in Chadron, Nebraska last month, and they asked me to be the keynote for a opening of an aviation wing at the museum out there.
Oh, nice.
And I found out he was a World War II instructor, and he taught hundreds of pilots for World War II right out of the Chadron Air Base.
Wow.
At the time.
And what wasn't the plane you trained on like an old World War II trainer?
The J3 Cub is what he would teach a lot of the new cadets how to fly. But I didn't realize that even when I was writing the book, I didn't realize how involved and what a big wheel he really was. When I met him, he was older and retired, but at young, his name was Frank Snook, and he was really somebody back then, which I just learned last month.
Yeah, it's amazing how we can learn new things even after years, So Don, your adventure, I mean, it took you forever, or not forever, but it took you everywhere, around the world, different jobs, different airlines, like you said, things that went out. But you also did some private or corporate flying too, right?
Right. It was funny. In the airline world, your airline goes out of business. You try to find a corporate job. Now you get a corporate job and you try to get back into the airlines. And in the meantime, you do whatever it takes, whether it's unloading trucks or driving trucks to get to that next flying job.
Yeah. And
if that's how nowadays, again, it is so short. If right now a kid with a little bit of ambition could throw a dart at the map in the United States, probably go there and find somebody that would sponsor him in an aviation job.
Wow.
It's turned out to be a phenomenal career path right now.
Yeah, because if you were to read your book, you would think, boy, I don't know that I'd ever want to be a pilot, right? But yeah, it's funny to hear that it is different, even though there's less airlines today than when you started.
And again, the pilot shortage is just phenomenal. I mean, I talk sometimes about the aviation gods all got together and decided, old Don Osborn's too old now to enjoy this. Now we can open those damn gates.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they waited until you were almost out the door, and they were like, okay, now, hey, Don, you want to come fly for us? No.
I've got a good friend who's just retiring, and he had what we call a Cinderella career. He went from a college to the military to an airline and worked that one airline all the way to the end.
Wow.
And he's actually boring. He doesn't have much of a story to tell.
Yeah.
He's still my good trusted friend, but he had what I didn't have a stellar career, but I had a fascinating career. He had a stellar career.
Yeah, a career that was very stable too, right? For
That's
him.
True, yeah.
But yeah, and it's, there's obviously some difficulties too, Don, because you had a family during all this.
Yeah.
And, I read in your book and, that your kids didn't understand that it wasn't normal for, or they thought, I'm probably going to paraphrase this wrong, but they were always, was it your daughter that said, how come daddy's not working?
Yeah, she asked one day, how come Daddy doesn't have a job like the rest of the daddies, and his hair? How come he can have long hair? Because
Yeah.
you know
Right.
I'm not going to waste money on a haircut till I get the next interview.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so that's gotta be so hard as a dad and as a husband, to sit there and, doing something you love and then, I know I read the one time you were mid-flight and they said, "Hey, by the way, this is your last flight." That's terrible, and then you gotta come home time and time again and tell your family. I mean, that's tough, but what I have to give you credit for is that you kept going. You just didn't give up and say, "That's it, I'm not gonna do anything," or, "I'm gonna do a total career switch." You put your nose to to the grindstone. You got out there, you supported your family, and then when the opportunity came back up to get in the air, you took it.
I have to be a little honest. There were times I thought, where else can I make a living in a small little area with a nice view? And by then, those photo mat shops, they weren't around anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to imagine the view from the office of a cockpit is pretty amazing.
That's one thing, after 25,000 hours, that's what you don't get tired of that. Like on a nice day where you're coming through the clouds and you pop up into the blue skies, you could see that 20 times an hour every day for the rest of your life and not get tired.
Yeah.
So I still tell people, I like this part. I like the manual mechanical part of flying still to this day, but you get real tired of everything that leads up to that and everything. After you
Yeah.
hear those wheels go, now the work starts again.
Exactly. Exactly. And with your career, and so Don, how long have you been flying altogether since you were 14? And I don't want
Yeah,
to I know
so
you said your age, but
Well, yeah, my 50-year class reunion is next week. So, and
wow.
it was before I got to say right around 53 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
For a
I mean,
living, I've been doing it for over 40. So,
yeah. I mean, that's just amazing to know that you've kept that flame, that passion for flying all these years. 50 years later, who does that? I mean, really, if you look at most people, sometimes their passions die out, but you had an opportunity to just keep it going, and that's amazing.
there was times I thought, should I go back to college and get an engineering degree? But it always came back to, no, that's work.
Yep,
How am I going to find something that pays well, that's this much fun?
exactly.
All in all, yeah, like I say, there's no way I could say I had a stellar, easy career. But I look back on it, I don't think I'd change it for the world. I was able to do things in an airplane that many people wouldn't even have a chance to do.
Yeah. And that moves me to where I want to go to our next segment was, some unconventional stories, but you've got some pretty memorable experiences from your career as a pilot, don't you?
Oh yeah, one of my last airline jobs, I flew for a company that had government contracts, and we did. I mean, we were allowed to do things that just weren't even legal as far as that set of regulations. We were an entire different set of regulations called public use.
Yeah, I do remember reading about that in the book.
And
Yeah.
the FAA couldn't touch us too much. They tried to a lot, and eventually they would. But I
Yeah,
like to
because
say now I'm old enough. If the FAA came after me today, it'd take them 7 years to figure it out and 7 years to do anything about it. So
yeah, exactly.
they're not. Yeah, I won. They lost.
Yeah, and is there, and obviously you've flown all over the place, but are there like encounters with specific people that were really memorable for you?
Oh, of course. I write some of the celebrities I met, and in flying. I got a chance to actually fly as a pilot with Jimmy Doolittle as a
Yeah.
passenger. And if you talk about one of the last great heroes in this world, it was Jimmy Doolittle. And what I remember, he was elderly at the time. He was in his mid 80s, I believe, early 80s. But talk about the nicest, most relaxed, laid back, decent guy. And then, but I think, man, you risk your life. You went on a suicide mission. I mean, but to look at the guy face to face, you never would have guessed it.
Yeah.
I saw something on the internet once, and it showed this old guy, and the old guy with a cane on a bench, and the caption was, "He was probably more badass than you'll ever think, ever,
Exactly.
ever would have been."
Yep. And it is funny because I do remember I saw a video on the internet, I don't know, a little while ago with a guy that was in his 90s. He was a boxer and he was beating up these young guys.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so funny. Just it reminded me of that. But yeah, and you've really, so you've got him who you flew with. I know you've flown with politicians. One that really struck me that was pretty awesome. And I'm a little bit younger. I'm in my 40s, but I remember Bob Hope. And, you saying that you flew with him. And, I just remember him being the funny man doing the telethons, and stuff, or the USO shows and things like that. And I just thought it was pretty cool that you got to fly Bob Hope.
Bob Hope was, yeah, he ranks way up there. I flew him enough that we actually got Christmas cards from him
Oh,
for
wow.
right up until the time he wasn't around anymore. I was in his living room of his house in Palm Springs. We flew him enough that, he walk on. It was, "Hi, Don, how are you today?" And of course, he had some jokes. One of my favorite Bob Hope stories is we're flying along one day, and the guy I'm flying with, he and I were pretty good friends, and I don't remember what the joke was, but we started laughing. This was a small Learjet, so there's no doors or separation. And we're trying to compose ourselves and get back.
Right.
And so we land, and Bob says, "What the hell were you guys laughing at?" He says, "I pay good money for jokes." He says, "I'll buy whatever you were laughing at." And
That's
it
funny.
must have not been something I felt we could sell to him.
That's funny. No, and it's great. And that was a lot of these folks were when you're doing more of like your corporate slash private
But
type
yeah,
jobs, right? As a private, so
yeah,
I would assume that a lot of people probably don't fly commercial that are celebrities.
yeah. They yeah, exactly. They can afford those price tags on a jet. But
Yeah,
for the most part, I heard the saying once that you treat a celebrity like family and treat a family like celebrity. But not counting a few politicians in my life, the celebrities were the nicest, laid back. They had nothing to prove to you. You get on, they don't have to prove to you that they're still somebody or they're important. They just basically are happy there's not people looking at them, and they're in their own airplane for a few hours. But yeah, some of the people are just wonderful. Robin Williams is probably my favorite. He's
yeah,
exactly like you'd expect him to be. I mean,
yeah. That was a
a
loss. That
mile a
was a
minute,
loss of
14,
yeah.
1,000 jokes, and he fell asleep. By the time he woke up and we were taxed, same thing, mile a minute, 1,000 jokes. And when you used to see him like doing the Carson show, that's exactly what he was really like. His mind just did not quit,
Just
and
high energy, huh?
the stuff he said was so incredibly funny that it's like, how does a human mind think of this situation and make it that funny over here?
And then be so quick witted with it too.
Yeah, right.
Any situation, he seemed like the type of guy that any situation he was in, he could find some humor in it and very quickly. Yeah. But, celebrities and people are not the only things you've flown, though, right? You've flown organs.
I talked about the organ flying, and I didn't do that for a long time. It was after my airline career. But one of the things I remember, and I talk about this in the book, I said, you need to be a poet to really describe this. But we would fly into an area with doctors and the nurses and all, and they would be an organ retrieval team. And so you'd be in this, it's usually late at night. Why, I don't know, it's late at night, but it almost always is. We'd land there, and there'd be 10, 12, sometimes other jets on that field, and that have come in for organ retrieval.
Yeah.
So a few hours later, here comes everybody back to the airplane, and they're all usually got a cooler with them, and that's where the organs are. And you stand there and you watch these airplanes depart all different directions in all different parts of the world, probably.
And yeah, and you said it correctly in your book too, because I've been in healthcare for a while and I've worked in different jobs, but
Yeah.
when I first started working, I worked security for a children's hospital here locally, and we would have organ donors, and you said it, the precision that goes into the timing and the coordination of all
Right.
that for a human organ. You hit it on the nail on the head, because even me, from being the type with being in security, we had to take the transplant teams or the organ donor teams to the morgue and while they harvest, and I mean, it's all timing, and it's amazing that you were a big part of that, and I'm
Each
sure
organ, yeah, each organ has a specific time period, and it depends on how old and where it's going, and they take. I mean, it's like the Indians in the plains countries talk about the buffalo. They used every single part of it except the horn, and they were trying to figure out how to make a bicycle ringer out of that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But no, it's amazing what they can harvest.
It really is.
Can't help but think if that was me and it's my time, I would love to think that my parts are going all over the place for
Yep,
even
getting
even
a
if it's
private pilot for your new lung or your liver, right?
exactly right.
But yeah, and these things are amazing, and the flights, and that you've done, and from such a long career. But that's and we talked about it a little bit with the ins and outs of companies going under and things like that. But you had some entrepreneurial pursuits outside of piloting as well, didn't you?
Just about, in the time period I was a pilot, I would say a lot of pilots had to find something else. And my goal was, after being in a situation where bang, overnight or that day you find out you're unemployed, you would see the panic in people's eyes.
Yeah.
I was lucky at an early age. I got to have something else to do. So I tried several businesses. One of the most successful businesses I had was a tree business, arborist.
Hmm.
And it was hard physical work. And another a joke I like to talk about is I did not have a gut till I was about 50. And around 50s, when I started working out of a bucket truck instead of climbing. And the bucket truck, and then we sold the business later on. And I swear I came home that afternoon and looked down, God, where did this gut come from? All of a sudden.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it was good for the pocketbook and my mental health and my physical.
Yeah, and I
But it
think
was nice. The airline would go out of business, and everybody panic. And, well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go home and cut trees, I guess, until
yeah,
I find another flying job.
exactly. You were a tree trimmer and a part-time pilot, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's way truer than I want to say. But my last airline job, the guy met me. I wasn't interested. I had said I think I'd done enough flying, and my tree business was going well. Well, he flew in to talk to me, to be his director of operations, and I kind of had forgot about it. And he said he's at the airport, and I picked him up in a bucket truck. And I had sawdust on me, probably a several day growth and hair on my ears. And
Yep.
I warned him. I said, I don't look like anybody that you're probably used to interviewing for a management position. He jumped in the bucket truck. We went down the road, had lunch, and he offered the job there during lunch. So that was my last big airline job.
Yeah, and so Don, you're still flying now, right? I think in your
I
book you said you were semi-retired.
Semi-retired is the exact fact. I'll be flying tomorrow. So I fly for an individual that owns his own jet. So I fly him in that jet where he wants. So
That's
you know,
awesome.
it's a beautiful part of aviation. Well, we'll drive up to the hangar. The hangar door opens. We park our cars. There's the airplane. We get in and go.
Yeah, it's almost like being pampered as a pilot too, right?
Oh, it is. It is. I think, I still ride the airlines to go out to Nashville to see my daughter, go to
Hmm.
Chicago to see friends. And I walk through the terminal now on the airline, think this was wonderful when I was here, but I'm kind of glad I'm not here anymore. It's
Yeah,
compared to what I'm doing now. And then I plan to be fully retired pretty quick. And I want to be a snowbird. I want to pursue a lot of other things. And I won't be one of those guys that just gives up because I can't fly anymore. I'll
right.
probably always fly a small airplane as long as I.
Yeah, and so for you, and I know you're still flying now, but even in your younger days, how did you balance your time, in the sky with your other ventures? Because if you had your tree business and you went back to working as a pilot, did that go on hold for a while, or did you still, do both?
That's a fun answer because it really wasn't up to you.
Right.
All, damn it, I'm unemployed again. Okay. But I look back on those, we call them furloughs, and you can use any F word you want. It all means the same thing in the airline, furloughed, fired, or whatever. So, but I look back on it, some of those furloughs, some of those unemployments, they were a lot of fun. I was a pool mom one summer. I took my kids to the pool every day and got to know all the other moms. And school would start, and I'd barely recognize them because now they had clothes on.
Yeah.
I'm used to laying around watching, talking to them at the pool. And so that I remember that summer especially. My son was about 3, my daughter's 4. They both learned to swim. They both learned to go off the high board that summer. They both learned to ride two-wheelers without training wheels.
Yeah, that's awesome. You got some actual time to be a dad and not be away from home all the time.
And again, if I would have known better, I would have just embraced and enjoyed every second of that. But of course, you're panicking, you're worrying about finding a job. You don't. I think that's what grandparents have to offer nowadays is the parents are busy and hectic, and the grandparents can relax and say, where's mom? If she's not looking, we'll go do this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's so much tougher too. You think, and you grew up in a single household with brothers and sisters, and with your mom being on her own and your dad kind of being out of the picture. That's. I mean, during that time, that was kind of unheard of, wasn't it? Or not as
Back then,
common
yeah,
as it is
it was a
now.
big deal back then, especially my mom. I called her, she was a Shiite Catholic. If whatever the Catholic said, that's what she would do. And that was incredibly important to her. But again, able to look back now, I probably was, had I had a dad that would have been over me and more forceful, I don't know that I would have. I taught myself to do a lot of things. Time I'd be, well, this kid's dad's teaching him how to drive, or this kid's dad's going to teach him how to shoot a gun this weekend. Well, I'm going to figure that out on my own. And I think that looking back, I built a lot of self-confidence.
Oh yeah,
And at a very young age, I realized, God, I can figure this out. I can do that.
yeah,
My
and
mom gave me a lamp once at a young age and said, fix this. Well, after being shocked about 4 times, I learned, hey, maybe unplug this stuff.
yeah, that might help, right?
Nothing comes easy, but the lessons are there.
I love that. Yeah. And it's tough that, to sit and look back and say, kids shouldn't have to, teach themselves everything like you had to. But you embrace, looking back, you're embracing it and saying, just like, I hope a lot of other kids that may be in the similar situation says, yeah, I didn't have a dad and that's unfortunate that was in my life. Right. But look at what I was able to do and prosper myself on my own. I mean, that's got to be a huge confidence builder.
I would never critique a parent nowadays because I personally know how hard it is to be a parent. Saying that, I think parents, they're too much. It's I'm going to drive little Joey here. I'm going to take him there and do this. At some point, that kid has to learn to fail a little bit. I always wonder about the new kid, and he's got his very first job, and that boss all of a sudden isn't concerned about his feelings and how he thinks things should be done.
Exactly. That was like most of the kids. I had a job one time, Don, where I managed a call center and had 100 direct reports.
Yeah.
And I worked with a lot of young people. And, I consider myself still young. I know people younger than me don't, but I still consider myself on the young spectrum. But the work ethic of younger people today just seems to be a lot different than what I grew up learning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. My son, he worked for himself right up until college and in the tree business and firewood and mowing lawns. He got a job working for a kind of a setup delivery kind of place. And we still joke about this. He's a young, 19-year-old kid, fresh in college. He says, sometimes my boss, I don't think he's too interested in my opinions.
It's like, yep, no, they're not. Right. Bottom line.
The flight attendants used to talk a lot on the bus going in and out about the company might not be concerned about my quality of life this month. And
Yeah.
I'd say, they're not concerned about your life, really.
At all. No,
They want you in that airplane at that time doing what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
That's what they care about. And there's no magic person up there thinking, well, is little Susie happy today?
Exactly. For the listeners, just to recash, we're talking about Don and his book, which is really about his life, where we land. And Don, one of the things I wanted to ask you, being a pilot, what inspired you to now become a writer?
I have to give my sister, publisher Annie, a lot of credit on that. I've always considered myself a writer. I've written a lot of songs and several stories, but never had the guts to really let too many other people read it. And I was writing an expose on the airline industry. I wanted to tell the world what's really going on in the airline world. And I sent it to my sister. She's busy. She doesn't have time. But she's a journalist major and a award-winning reporter. So she has a lot of knowledge. And so she started reading it. My working title at the time was Flying Sausage. And the concept was just, this is what's going on in the world. My sister, she says, I don't think people are interested in this. They don't want to know what's going on underneath the terminal. They just want to, like Seinfeld says, they want to sit in a seat and go where the ticket says they're going to go. But she did say, I see a really interesting memoir here. So let's change it from an expose to a memoir. And I thought, my gosh, I don't know if I like me well enough to write about me that long. Turns out I
You
must
sound
have.
like myself, Don. I'm like the same way. I don't know that I like myself enough to
Yeah.
write a book about me.
But I think everybody has at least one book in them, and everybody should get up in the morning or before they go to bed and write something because it's incredibly therapeutic. It's fun. It puts your head on straight sometimes. Like maybe I'm not so weird, or God, maybe I shouldn't tell that to everybody.
Right.
Written down here on paper, maybe we should hide that.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm so glad that you did because I think our listeners are really going to enjoy this book. You know, memoirs are one of those things where they can be extremely interesting, they could be fun, or they could be terrible. And I think this is a branch between the interesting and the fun because, you know, you put a lot of relatable stories in there, but you also brought up some of these, you know, issues that you talked about in the airline industry too. Like for me, the the every 6 months having to go for a physical or a checkup as a pilot, which that to me sounds okay. I get that. But then if you go in there and say, hey, you know what, I'm having some depression, and then all of a sudden now you're done.
Right.
You know?
And so it's a sad, sad state. I have several friends that are doctors. In fact, I was just talking with one yesterday, and it's a lot of airline pilots, professional pilots, die earlier than they should because they're hiding that from the government. Like the FAA can't get me anymore. I mean,
right.
But I had a knee replaced while I was still flying professionally in the airlines. Never told the FAA about it. That would have grounded me for maybe a couple years. Now I don't. Now if they come looking for me now, here, you want my knee back? You can have it.
Yeah, here.
But
Exactly.
it's just things like that, and like depression is what I talk about. And I'm fortunate. I don't believe I've ever suffered depression, but a lot of people do. But what if a pilot is suffering depression? He can't certainly tell a doctor about it. He probably can't tell his family about it because, now they're going to be worried. They're and a blood pressure, a coughs, eyesight. It's all pilots hide that from the doctors.
And I remember, Don, when I was growing up, I remember they used to always tell you if you wear glasses, because I was a kid, and I had glasses as a kid, they say, if all you have glasses, you can never be a pilot. Yeah. And, so that was it for me because I always loved the idea of flying. But, my eyesight at the time, I had glasses and that was the thing. You couldn't, I think they've changed that now, right?
Oh, yeah. As a young boy, I used to hear that, too. You couldn't be a pilot. And my ability to believe and be a Christian is probably way, way down there. But as a young boy, I used to pray that I didn't have to wear glasses.
Yeah.
And now that once I turned about the first time it was just last year I got an actual pair of prescription sunglasses. But when I started getting readers and putting readers on, I would think, God, am I going to hell now because I prayed so much? Does that mean I'm not going to make it? I'm going to go to hell because I need readers now.
No, I think you'll be fine, Don.
Okay,
I can't talk about all, everything you've done in your life, but I don't think you'll go to hell for having glasses.
Okay. But as a young boy, I used to, that was a big deal. And
yeah.
And again, as a pilot's eyes, he might not pass his, he gets close to not quite passing his eye test during his physical. Well, that's going to make your blood pressure go up. That's going to make your heart beat faster. Yeah, it's going to cause stress. One thing, pilots we're trained at an incredibly high level to deal with certain kinds of stress. Most of us at my age, we could have an engine failure, an engine fire, massive, and we're probably not going to break a sweat. But what we have no training in at all is, so you're walking out the door that morning, your wife yells at you and calls you a name. Well, you're a human being that's bouncing around your head. Now, 8 hours later, you're in that airplane when you've got to be focused on a very strict number or a procedure, but that's still in the back of your mind. What the hell was her problem this morning? And
how does it?
A lot, but as a pilot, you can't go to. You would have to be very careful to go to a psychologist, for example, and say, I think I need some counseling to get my head back on straight.
And it's one of those things, and I think you said it right, is it being outdated, the procedures, the medical procedures and everything with the FAA being outdated for old times, they really haven't changed it much. And it's like, listen, I believe I just read this today, Don, more than 1 in 5 Americans has some type of mental illness. And it's like, so the fact of having, just because you have a mental illness, it can be treated very easily. A lot of stuff, especially like depression. Depression comes to a lot of folks. It can be easily treated. It's very, mainstream now. And to stop someone just because they have depression,
Right.
from flying, even though it's treated, to me is ridiculous.
Even if they could treat that, you don't have to pull the guy's license away
No,
from him. Let's treat it. Let's give him a few months to work through it.
exactly. And just see how he goes. Maybe if it's a captain, like you said, maybe put him in the co-pilot chair for a
Right.
little while or something like that, right?
Just have the airline itself saying, we're going to put you in the training department, or we're going to, any number of options other than the feds just pulling your license,
And yep.
say, AMF, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, listen, I've dedicated my whole life to this, and just because I have, an illness or whatever it may be, just like you said, high blood pressure. I mean, high blood pressure is so easily controllable, right? That, that could. Yeah.
It's only been the last 15, 20 years where a pilot could take blood pressure medicine. That was a big no-no. One of my favorite ignorant government stories is the hearing test that we take is based on the fact that back in the days when airplanes were open cockpit bi-wing,
Yeah.
you would strum those guy wires, and you would listen for E's and A's, that way you would know that they're in tune, meaning they're properly tensioned.
Yeah.
And the hearing test is based on that to this very day. Well, we wear noise canceling headsets, and I can hear a pin drop in the back of the airplane with this technology nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. And But Don, with you, so you've had all these experiences and you put this in a book, which I think is fantastic. What was your process for weaving together, because you filled this thing with your hard knocks, with fortunate breaks and some questionable decisions, right?
Yeah.
But how did you get that all together?
I have to go to my sister for this. She has this incredible talent to make one word flow to the next word, that sentence flow to the next sentence. And in my opinion, that book does it as well as any. And then the paragraph flows, the chapters flow. And so I have to give her a lot of credit for her talent and ability. And it's funny, during our writing process, she'd call, I would write something, send it to her. We'd talk back and forth, and I'd hear her typing while we're talking. But she'd call up once in a while, or, what is this? She says, is this really, are you that bad of a speller, or is this some aviation thing? What is wrong with you?
Well, it's a good thing Anna's not doing my book, because I'm a terrible speller.
Me too. To this day, I went to a Catholic school, and the nuns tied my left hand behind my back, because back then that was the devil's hand, and forced me to learn to write with my right hand. Well, my daughter, who is a neuropsychologist, says that's why you can't spell, because part of your brain was messed up, And I said, well, I think I can't spell because those nuns would beat my fingers with a ruler. It's one or the other.
Yeah, you did not go to Catholic school during the best times, did you?
Oh, no, I look back on it now, and I hate to admit it, but I wouldn't like a nun if I saw her today.
Yeah, I mean,
they were mean. They were
tortured you, so to speak,
Can I say bitches on the?
Yeah, you can say it. Yeah, it's free speech here on this show. So
they shouldn't have been allowed to be around children, and today they probably wouldn't be.
No, it's so amazing to me how things have changed, and I couldn't imagine going to school, especially a Catholic school back then. Any school, really, discipline has changed in school so much. Even from when I started school, I remember first, second grade, seeing the paddle hanging over the principal's desk, and now that wouldn't even be a thought. But
my new book, it was released yesterday, and it's a series of short stories. And there's one story in there where we drove a small Honda Civic into the school through the hallways and back out the back door without ever getting caught.
That's awesome.
Today, can you imagine the SWAT team would be there?
Yeah. Oh, in a heartbeat. Exactly. But now with your book, is there a hope that you have that readers will take away from your candid storytelling?
The several things. I joke. I wrote it at an 8th grade level so pilots would like it. my idea on this book is, when it comes down to it, somebody should be able to read my book and think, man, if a guy like that could do it and make it, I certainly have a chance. And
I love it.
That's probably the biggest thing. The other thing is, I hope people laugh. I hope they really like it. In this day and age, there is so much going on and so much pressure everywhere. I hope this is a little relaxing for them. And say somebody's on an airline now, and everybody's a nervous flyer today because of the media.
Yes.
They're so wrong so many times. But hopefully they can read that book and have maybe a little idea of what's going on behind that locked door and be just a touch more comfortable, maybe.
And I learned, not only was it entertaining, your book entertaining, and I had those laughing moments where I was just, laughing or shake my head like, oh yeah, I've been there, but it was educational as well, because I learned so much about what goes on in flight, just from a pilot's perspective and from what you have to go through that I never had an idea. And, knowing all the redundancies that are built into today's modern aircraft, that blew my mind. And we'll go there. I want to save that for a little bit, because I want to dive deeper into some thoughts that you had there. But,
What you were just talking, I have to go back again to my sister, because she didn't know which end of an airplane went forward. And so she would ask a lot of questions. She would say, and I would just use the aviation terms, talk at an aviation, and she'd say, wait a minute, what does that mean? And so because of that, she was able to bring it down to where a non-pilot, non-aviation person would enjoy it just as much as a pilot. So that helped a lot, because many times she'd say, wait, what are you saying here?
Yeah, that's awesome, because not only did you, and I'm sure, with your aviation history, you're like, okay, a lot of pilots are probably going to read this book, but I think you've opened up, by the way that you wrote it, well, both of you wrote it, and opened it up to normal, everyday people. It's very inspirational in the fact that, and I love that you said, I want to show that, yes, you can do it, no matter what your background is, how you were brought up, where you're brought up, if you put your heart and mind into it, put the work in, you can do it. And that's what, my podcast is all about, Don, is normal everyday people doing extraordinary things. And I'm sorry, I can't fly. So flying is pretty extraordinary to me.
The title, my sister and I and the editor, we bounced titles around a lot, and we were well into the finishing stages and really hadn't had the title yet. And but the title, I was real happy with what we all agreed on, because it's where you land. I mean, it doesn't really matter where you started, what problems you had, where you took off from. It all comes down to where you end up, and what are you going to do with that once you're there. And so
exactly,
the title says a lot, that what I hope people take away from the book.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this is that you showed that resilience, with your days in the airlines and up and down, and you showed the humor in the book, and just an unyielding spirit was just really there. And that's kind of what I took from it, Don, was just, this is what I think the average everyday person goes for. A little bit of humor in their life, some resilience and spirit. And I mean, you really packed that in here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, because it's so nice to get other people's opinion. Because when you're writing, a lot of times you're all by yourself, and you wonder what, are they going to come and get me and take me away? Or are they going to understand what I'm trying to say?
Yep. Exactly. I love that, Don. And, when during your writing, and even I know you were working with your sister, but did you ever have that imposter syndrome type thing? Like, I'm just going to quit doing this because it's not any good. Or did you ever have any of those feelings while you were writing?
Well, being a pilot, I have an incredible ego. So no, I don't think so. To this day, I probably, I always have a writing project going on, and there's always something bouncing around in my head. So I don't think I got that writer's block or that give up attitude. And
that's awesome,
I think probably my sister Annie, she probably once in a while thought, "My God, this guy's hard to work with. Is this one of those things I'm going to have to report him to the authorities? I don't know."
Well, thanks to Annie, though, for bringing it down to the normal person level,
right.
And asking you those questions about, hey, an aviation term that maybe just a dude like myself wouldn't get. So I appreciate that, because it made it so relatable and just so fun to read. But Don, I want to switch gears a little bit. I have a little session that I like to call Dude Q&A. It's just short questions to help our listeners get to know you a little bit. No overthinking, just quick reactions.
Okay.
But you'll find it's super
bleep,
easy.
Right?
We can bleep. We can bleep and take out.
Fast.
And these will probably be pretty easy for you. You've probably been asked them a million times. But what's your favorite destination to fly to?
I did a podcast a while back, and that question, and I said Chadron, Nebraska. That's where I grew up.
Yeah.
But I love Costa Rica. My son and I spend a lot of time down in Costa Rica. That's a very common question and incredibly difficult to answer. For example, Teterboro, New Jersey in the wintertime is hell. In the summertime, it's kind of a nice place.
Exactly. Yeah, like I live in Northeast Ohio, so if you're flying into Cleveland Hopkins or Akron, Canton,
sure.
you're like, oh, I don't want to go there in the winter.
Yeah.
So, but no, that's awesome. And I'm sure that probably depends as well, right? On what's your favorite destination. Like maybe there's something there that you like to do, or,
Yeah.
so that's kind of a
I
tough
get
question.
nowadays the pilot shortage is so big. I have several friends that are still asking for some pilot service here and there, and I say, well, maybe if you're flying to Nashville, I'll go
Yeah.
because that's where my
Because you get
daughter
something.
and
Yep.
grandkids live. If you're going to Chicago, I still have a lot of friends there because I was based there for many years.
Yeah. You had your, what did you call it? I'm blanking now, but your pad,
The crash
the
pads.
crash pad. Thank you. I could not remember the crash word, but yeah, in
Yeah,
Chicago, because you were
right.
kind of based, or that was a hub for you, right? For a
Yeah,
long
I was
time.
based out of Midway for about 15 years. So
Yeah. So, okay. Next question. See, that wasn't so bad. Pretty easy. What is the scariest moment you ever experienced in the cockpit?
in the cockpit, I love to tell this story. We were flying. I was at Braniff, thought I had the world by the tail, and we get a message that comes across one of our 8-car communication things, and it says you're unemployed. The security will meet the airplane, and I say that jokingly because it wasn't that scary. But man, the captain was pissed off. He knew what it meant. I was young enough. I'm thinking, what are they talking about? It's
Yeah.
like
Imagine if you guys just got up and said, you know what? Hey, we're not employed anymore, so this plane's on its own.
yeah, I asked the captain. I said, "Let me tell these passengers we're unemployed. They
You,
need to be as pissed off as I am right now."
and you want to see people freak out, just tell them that. Get on that mic,
Yeah,
right, Don?
but as far as scary, I really, anything I had to encounter, I've declared emergency 3 times, but I was so very well trained for that emergency that again, I don't think you broke a sweat. So I was fortunate enough to be very highly trained for what I had to deal with at the time.
Yeah, and you know what? I can relate to that because of my previous life as a police officer. I dealt with so many dangerous situations that at time it just, it almost comes naturally to you, doesn't it? You're just like, oh, this has
Yeah,
gone wrong. Okay, I'll fix it this way, So
I know cops, athletes, pilots, we call it muscle memory.
it is.
You've trained enough on it that you automatically know where that switch is going to be and you know what it's going to do when you flick it.
Yeah, and that, like you said, that training just kicks in and that muscle memory, and you're halfway through fixing it, and you're like, oh, I didn't even realize I was doing it.
Yeah. And
But
in fact,
yeah,
as a simulator instructor, that's one thing you got to really hammer into a professional pilot is slow down.
yeah.
I know you did everything right, but go a little slower and think a little more.
And there's a story in there for the folks listening that Don wrote about one of his buddies that he put through the simulator and gave him some situations. But it is funny. You'll have to read it. I thought that's something I would do to one of my buddies, Don. But all right, if you could have any superpower, and I know you covered this in your book, but as a pilot, what would it be?
I love Superman since I was a little boy, and I want all of Superman's powers.
I love it.
And
And I mean,
I want them now.
you've got the flight down.
Yeah, I have a Spider-Man T-shirt, and people like that, and they say, aren't you a little old to be wearing cartoons? And no, I was always told, dress for the job you want, not for the
Exactly. I don't know
job
if you
you
can
have.
see behind me, but there's a Captain America back there. So,
Okay, great.
but yeah, I'm the same way. You got to have, if you can't just suppress the kid all the time, right?
Right. Yeah.
What's the most unusual item you've ever transported on a flight?
I had a seeing eye pony once, a miniature horse, and that thing was phenomenal. They say they live 15 years longer than a dog. They are as easy to train as a dog. They're much stronger. And this thing was just, he comes walking on, click, click, and here's a little horse standing there with his harness on. And I would have liked to, I had to, eventually quit talking to her and the person and go get ready to fly. I would have talked to her for 5 hours. I had so many questions about what that horse could do. And he was just big enough that they buy a seat for him. And he didn't sit on the seat, but he kind of stood where his
Yeah,
butt was
like
on the seat.
in a little
Yeah.
bit in the aisle. Yeah. It's funny that because when I read that, that was one of the stories I related to, Don. And this goes back to, my early security days of working at the Children's Hospital. We had a lot of emotional support animals or care animals that would come in.
Right.
And one of them was Petey the pony. And he was an
Yeah.
emotional support pony they would bring in. He would see the kids, they'd pet him, stuff like that. So I was like, oh my gosh, there's another one out there. But that's an amazing story.
I write about a politician who I despised and didn't like just because of the way she treated everybody, but she didn't like the dogs coming on. The Secret Service will make sure that the dogs come on and sweep the airplane and then twice. and she didn't like the dogs coming on. But I wouldn't in my wildest dreams think about starting an airplane that the dogs hadn't been through once. And
Yeah,
they were phenomenal to watch. They love doing it's a big game to them.
it is. Yeah, they want to find something. But yeah, and I believe, and I'm not going to give it away, but you named that politician, if I'm not
Yeah, I
mistaken,
did.
and I'm not going
And
to give it
again,
away.
this time I have to blame Annie. She watered it down quite a bit for
I
what
figured, yeah, I
what she
figured it might
really
have been.
said, what she was really like. Annie said, "We can't write this. We can't." And I said, "Oh,
Yeah,
come on." And she said, "I'll do as much as I can."
I love you don't want to end up on a certain list, right?
Yeah,
With
yeah.
that person.
All right, we just
But
gave it away.
yeah, oh darn, people might know, but hopefully it gives people enough interest to say, you know what, I'm going to go buy Don's book.
There you go. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, next one. If you weren't a pilot, what career do you think you would have pursued?
Rock and roll, no question about it. I still to this day would love to stand in front of 50,000 people and with an amplifier that's too legal to even should be played. And
Kind of like the one. Do you remember the movie Back to the Future where he
yeah,
plays that
yeah,
huge
yeah.
amp?
If that's the one other profession I always, the thing about music is it was that talent thing. You can learn to be a pilot if you work hard enough. With music, you got to be born with a little bit of it.
You got to have a little bit of talent, right?
Somewhere, yeah, somewhere there's and for me, it's all about it's I've practiced every day for many years, and I can do the notes, I can hit what I'm supposed to hit, but it's not there. It's just it'll never be, you know, never be a John Fogerty making that guitar talk.
Yeah, but you do get to play. You play with a band, right?
I do.
Yeah.
I've played in several bands over the years, and now I'm kind of I do a lot of open mics and that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
nice.
I'm going back to my 50th year reunion in Chadron tomorrow, and the band that's in Chadron that's been there for years, and they were actually inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall or Music Hall of Fame, Nebraska.
Cool.
They'll probably let me sit in and do some harmony for a song here or there somewhere.
Nice. That's awesome. Even if it's a hobby, to keep it going,
Oh
it's
yeah.
amazing.
I think playing an instrument it is as good for your brain as anything it can.
I agree. I was a band geek in school,
Yeah.
so I played music and I loved it. And there's a fact out there that people that are involved in music, especially at a young age, generally will excel educationally.
I believe that a lot. I know we talked about depression. We talked about all kinds, but you sit down and put that instrument in your hands and everything goes away for a while.
It does. It does. It did for me, for years.
About
I mean,
resetting, yeah.
yeah.
I have an old Epiphone in the plane. It's my guitar, airplane guitar. It's there all the time. It's in the hotels with me.
Nice. So you can always play wherever you go.
Exactly.
That's awesome. All right. Final question to Dude Q&A. What is your favorite aircraft to fly?
I go back to I love the Boeings. The Boeings were phenomenal to fly, and they were my first big airplane. But I have a Grumman Cheetah now, which is a joy to fly. It's a little 4-place single engine, but I got to go back to the J3 Cub. You start it you prop it with your hand. You don't get it much higher than 700 feet. That's back to the really fun flying.
Yeah, and that's gonna kind of lead me to our next thing, which is great because this is a great segment. So hopefully you didn't find that too bad, Don. I just it's some quick questions, let everybody get to know you a little bit, but. And this is what I wanted to talk about where I was going earlier was the technology in the planes. And, so what I do now, so I was a law enforcement officer for 13 years. I had some career changes, almost because of the same thing like you did. I got laid off in 2009. So I had to decide, am I going to stay doing this or am I going to do something else? So I went into technology, and now I have the great pleasure of working with a bunch of people that build AI models. And, so this is where I was going. It really intrigued me because you talked about all the redundancies that are in the airplane and, how there's a backup to the backup to the backup. Right. And, I was wondering, could you just provide just a little bit? Because I think this might help folks as well that may be afraid of flying today to know that, you are safer flying than you are driving.
No question about it. There's statistics out there that more people die a day in car wrecks than in a year. And one of my favorites are more people have died on the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge than in the history of aviation from the Wright brothers till today. So statistically, the problem is is media, really. Let's say you and I are in my little car and we crash at an intersection in your hometown, and we don't survive. Well, it's probably going to make the local paper because you're somebody in Ohio, and that's about what it's going to do. If you and I get in a two-seater airplane crash at that same intersection, same time of day, it's national news
Absolutely.
for weeks and weeks. It's because in radio in media there's a thing, I think, fear sells beer.
Yes, exactly.
Let's make people afraid.
How can I strike fear into the hearts of Americans
Right.
today, right?
Yeah, and then they'll buy stuff on the internet.
Yep.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
no, it's the miles of travel that goes on and on. The Boeings, for example, even the airplane I fly now, there would have to be 3 or 4 failures for even the light to come on to tell me that something's wrong at a lower level.
Yeah.
Just like you said, we have a backup battery for the backup battery. I mean,
Right.
oh, and that's one reason airplanes cost so much.
Yeah, and the fact, like you told me, like with autopilot and what autopilot can do, even compared to 20, 30 years ago, is what would you say you could go up like almost 400 feet, set it, and never touch it again?
Yeah, and a perfect day, if no changes, that autopilot could come on and stay on till after landing.
That's
The
so crazy to me.
modern airplanes will land themselves and apply the brakes. So
Yeah.
there's new airplane. A lot of these single engine jets that are coming out, they have a panic button in them. The Diamond is one of them, and the Cirrus jet has a button that if it's a single pilot airplane, if the pilot dies, the passenger can press a button that will take it to the nearest suitable airport and land.
Yeah, that is so amazing, isn't it?
Right. And then so people start talking, well, someday there won't be any pilots on an airplane. Well, there always will be one
Yeah.
because the government will have to have somebody to blame.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And they're not going to blame themselves, right?
Even if he's sitting in the back playing with his computer, he will be on because somebody will have, the FAA has to assess blame somehow.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that really intrigued me, because then you said with the advances that we've seen in AI that, right now you basically say you have a pilot and a co-pilot, and it's basically a redundancy, right? If something
Exactly.
happens to the pilot, the co-pilot can take over, even though the plane essentially is flying itself. And,
Exactly.
you made a good point in the book that AI at some point will be able to fly the plane from takeoff to landing all on its own, probably better than we can, because,
Well, an autopilot, I mean, I don't like to admit it, but an autopilot flies better than I will ever be able to fly. It makes thousands of adjustments a minute,
Yep.
where I make 2 or 3 adjustments.
Exactly. Yeah. But one of the interesting things of that is, even if it doesn't get rid of pilots altogether, because I think most people, especially in a commercial or we'll call it an airline atmosphere, are not going to feel safe letting a computer fly. So there's probably always going to be one pilot. But I loved the fact that you said, but it may reduce the need for that second pilot.
Right. And that would make a lot of management type people happy.
Yeah.
But then you have to say that one pilot on board is still a human being. What if he's having a really bad day that day? The computer's not going to recognize the AI is going to see the proper switch was flipped, and that's it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
I have a real dear friend that had a heart attack shortly after he landed, and the co-pilot was able to get him to the hospital and save his life and everything. But imagine a few
Yeah.
a few hours earlier, he had that heart attack, and he was a single pilot.
Oh, yeah. It would have
One of
been.
my favorite things to say about a single pilot: you find the healthiest guy in the world that's never done anything in his life but drink water and eat carrots.
Right.
What if he choked on one of those carrots that morning?
Exactly. That's funny. No, but it is just amazing to see. And I know the one thing that really got me, and I hope I'm not giving away too much of the book, but was the fact that they put the feeling into the plane, because
Artificial feel, exactly. Yeah, the jet I fly now has the same thing, because it's so fast and the air is so thin that without an artificial feel, you wouldn't be able to really control it. Because
would you like oversteer or stuff? Oh
oversteer
yeah.
because,
I could
yeah,
see that. But no,
so the
I
art
wanted to, yeah. I wanted to ask that because, number one, I know people are afraid of flying today. And, there's been a lot of, and just like you said, I don't want to say a lot of crashes, but a lot of televised crashes lately that people are like, I don't know if I want to fly. But, there are those redundancies in there. And, a lot of those.
The problem is, if an airplane crashes, it's almost always 3 things. It was pilot error. We hate to admit it, but a human. It was mechanical, or it was some type of weather related. And the weather goes back to pilot error. Now, some incredibly, I have a picture of me in a 737 landing at Gulfport, Mississippi, and there's a tornado in that picture in the back as we were landing. Now, we were in smooth air. It was raining. It was smooth air, uneventful landing, taxied in, offloaded. And I didn't see that picture for several days later. But I had somebody looked out the window and saw what this photograph was able to capture.
Yeah.
There would have been mass panic in that.
You would have had to get on the microphone and say, "Okay, folks, calm down."
A lightning strike, for example. Airplanes are hit by lightning all the time, but imagine a news story talking about a lightning strike.
Yeah.
Birds can sit on those power lines because they're not grounded, same way with an airplane. But imagine a news reporter, the inflection they would use describing a lightning strike.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. It would be.
You have probably been on an airliner that was hit by lightning, and you know,
and never knew it.
And never knew it.
Yep.
A big strike, depending on where it enters the airplane, it departs somewhere from the airplane. There might be a pop or even a little hole that's blown out somewhere. Again, they're designed for that.
Yeah, that's pretty, and that's great to know. And again, like I said, I know that the airline industry is, and it's a wonderful thing if you think about it, because, you know, years ago, thinking back to, you know, even when we went west, right? Covered wagons and horses, you know,
Yeah.
to now, what is it, 150 years after flight has begun? And I mean, we've got all this technology and we can get anywhere in the world in a matter of hours in most cases.
If I had one thing I could change, I would change, you know, why the media will interview some know nothing passenger coming off the airplane, and he'll invariably say, "I thought we were going to die," or "I thought."
Right.
Well, I mean, what if he's a dentist? Am I going to walk into his dentist chair and say, "I think I'm going to die"? You know,
exactly. It was a terrible
don't
experience.
Allow that guy to say, you know, he shouldn't be allowed to have his opinion on something he's that ignorant with. You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
no, and you know what? And they find the most ignorant person to make the statement too. I feel like they're like, you know, they probably interviewed 50 people beforehand. Exactly. They're like, no, the pilot did a great job. Sure, there was, you know, a rough, but they did this. And then you get I thought I was going to die.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, let's get some fear going.
Yeah, the fear mongering at its best. But no, Don, we're coming up on an hour, and I want to be cognizant of your time. But I really want to thank you for this. Number one, for writing the book, for Annie for helping you, because I think she did a good job and putting it in dumb people's terms like mine.
Yeah, phenomenal.
But it was very, very good, very relatable. I just want to see what's next for you. I know you're talking about retirement coming up, but what do you think's next chapter in your book?
Lots of chapters in my book. We have my latest book. Our latest book was released yesterday. It's a series of short stories, and I think it's the funniest stuff we've ever written. We also have a children's book out now to relate to Where We Land.
What are the name of those two books, Don?
Where We Land is the children's version, so they're both Where We Land.
Oh, nice.
And those are available now whenever you find mine. And then this latest one that was released is called The Ding Dong Altar Boy.
Okay, now I got to read that because the title got me.
And I think it's a tale of an affirmation addict.
Yeah, awesome.
When the book finally came out, Annie and I, this book, a lot of they were just stories, and we're talking about them back and forth, and I could hear her typing, and she'd send it to me, even though I knew the story, and I just had told it to her a couple days earlier. I would start laughing reading it, and I'd tell her, we have something here. This is going to appeal to a lot of people.
That's awesome. And when you know that, and when you can work with your sister, that's something special in itself.
Yeah, and she's got her a futuristic sci-fi novel coming out, and probably, I hope, by the end of the year.
Well, excellent. I'm going to have Annie on the show then.
You do, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I was wondering if she was going to join you because, she helped write the book. But
well, when we do a podcast together, I really have fun because we play off each. She's very strict and straight, and we have a lot of fun. But I asked her, "Why aren't you on this?" And she said, "Look at the title, Just a Dude. I'm not a dude."
No, I'm just a dude. Normal everyday folks. That's what we're looking for.
I told her, I said, just pretend. They won't know.
Exactly.
Said, well,
it's for dudes and dudettes alike.
Okay, you need to interview her because she's
absolutely
incredibly interesting from a whole different angle than I am. So,
I love it. It. And Don, any final thoughts? Or sorry, let me back up here. Where can our listeners find your books?
It's just about anywhere you buy books. Barnes and Noble, Amazon has everything. There's several local bookstores now. There's one in Shadler, Nebraska, called the Cocoa Shack that is selling books. Annie has several in her. She lives in Raleigh. So basically, if you want the book, you can Google
anywhere your books are sold, pretty much.
Exactly.
Right?
That's the way to see it.
And do you have a website or anything like that, Don?
She does, and gosh, she's going to kill me, but I don't have it in front.
And that's okay, because I know that Annie sent me a bunch of your information. So
Good.
For our listeners out there, if you go to justadudepodcast.com, all of Don's information will be there. It should have his website. If you have it, if she brought any social media links, Don, they'll all be there. So you'll be able to see that at justadudepodcast.com, and you'll be able to get a hold of Don and buy the books.
Yeah, you saved me, because Annie has a newsletter too that has everything we're doing on it. So
excellent. And any final thoughts, Don, before we call it a wrap?
I really appreciate your time. I can't believe it's been an hour.
I know. It seemed like 15 minutes.
Coming up on 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate it.
Don, thanks so much for joining us. I know our listeners are going to love this. Our listeners are going to love your book. I'm going to show it up one more time.
Okay.
Don Osborn, Where We Land. It's at bookstores everywhere, anywhere you can find books. I'm sure that even if they don't have it, they could probably order it for you or go to Amazon.com. But you are going to love this. It's not just about pilots and, air traffic control and different things. It's real life stories that you can relate to. And it's just a great overall book to show what resilience and spirit can do for the life. So, Don, thanks so much again for joining me. And, again, you're welcome back anytime. If you write additional books, I want to hear about them, and let's get you back on the show.
Well, Nate, I appreciate your time, and plan for Annie and I to come back.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Just a Dude Podcast. Big thanks to Don Osborn for taking us along on his wild ride through the skies and sharing the stories behind Where We Land, a pilot's reflections at altitude. If you want to grab a copy and dive into his journey, head over to Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. You can also check out Don's link at justadudepodcast.com, where he'll have a special guest page. If you like this show and it resonated with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button or leave a review. We can keep this conversation going on social media as well, as we're on all platforms. Until next time, keep it real, and I'll catch you on the next one. I've been Nathan with Just a Dude Podcast.